Hi, this is Kylie Koo. Welcome to my studio. We are continuing with the Let's Journal prompt in the Mixed Media Emporium Facebook group. And I'm going to do a journal page today in the journal that I made at the start of the year. I'll leave links to how I made the journal and the pages that I've already done, both above and in the description box below. I've decided today that I'm mainly going to do a collage journal page, and I've already pulled out a series of images from my collage folders that I think I might want to use today. So I'm just looking for a page to work on, and you'll see that some of these pages already have some paint on or collage on them. I just did that kind of when setting up this journal. I tend now only to use pieces of images that I collect from magazines. Rarely do I use an entire piece. So this one was of interest to me because it had that eye with the kind of fabulous colours of the eyeshadow, but the strands of hair going across. So all I'm going to do now is to pull out a few pieces that I think will work with that. I liked the kind of blue-green tones that were within the eyeshadow, and I'm thinking that I want to go towards that colour today, albeit I could have gone towards orange as well. And you'll see that I do incorporate some little bits that are more natural colours, but a lot of blues and greens today. So I'll just leave you for a little minute while I pull these out. Now that I've decided on my images, what I want to do is to start to distress these. Now sometimes what I do is I just take a piece of sandpaper and distress them, but I've also found that if you put them over something rough underneath or something like a stencil, you can get some nice patterns coming out on them. It doesn't necessarily always pick up the full stencil, but I'm not really after that. I'm really just looking to distress the images. As far as possible, I don't want them to be entirely recognisable as they were. Now, some papers will scratch a lot easier than others. Some are quite thick, some are thin, and it's quite nice to use different stencils, but you don't need to use stencils for this. Anything rough underneath, even a piece of corrugated cardboard, if you put it underneath, put your image on top, and then just rub over it. So for the next minute or so, I'm just going to start to distress all of these images. And I just take the dust off with just a household paintbrush. Now I think that has really created some nice interesting patterns on the image. It's changed them quite a bit. You can still see some of the image, but for others it's almost created its own little different feel to the piece. And all I'm going to do now is to try and arrange these into a composition on the page. Now I will leave a list of all the products that I'm using in the description box below, and I will of course also leave a link to the Mixed Media Emporium Facebook group. Now that I have my composition more or less in place, what I'll do is I'll start to glue the pieces down just using some gel matte medium. As I start to glue, I might change them here and there, but I know roughly the composition that I'm looking for. So this process for me is what I would call an intuitive process. Although I knew I wanted to work with collage, I didn't exactly know where it was going to take me. And here I just picked up an awl that happened to be lying close by, and I just put some scratch marks into the piece and just make some marks really with the awl, and these will show up a little bit later on in the process. So I'm just going to use some burnt umber fluid acrylic now, and I'm just going to take some of those white pieces of paper down the ripped edges where you can see it in the middle there of the page, and I'm just going to start to darken them slightly. It just gives it a bit of an aged effect. And I'm now just going to take some white gesso just to try and help integrate all the pieces together. And I'm applying it quite sparingly, just using an old plastic card there. And where I get a bit too much on covering the eye, you'll see me just spray that a little and lift some of that off. But this just helps to bring all the pieces together and gives it a more cohesive look. I've now decided that I want to do a little bit of stenciling, and just using this one that I'd used as part of the distressing process, just going to add some, I think this is called Mermaid. Again, I'll leave the actual make and colour below, but I'm just going to use a stencil brush just to start to add a little bit more to the page. And I thought it'd be quite good to use this stencil because I can see it in other parts where I've actually used it to distress the pages. I don't want this to stand out too much, but I do want to be able to see it. Now, this type of distressing images is not for everyone. It may be too grungy for some people, but this is the way that I like to work. I like to integrate the pieces using gesso, but I also like to distress them to take away from that original kind of photographic look to them. As I say, this is very much an intuitive process for me. I set out to do some collage, that's what I really fancied doing today, but no notion at all of exactly how this would look. So how it's starting to turn out, the way that it's going, is quite a surprise to me. And because it's intuitive, it's not just simply about throwing something down on the page. There is a bit of a kind of thought process behind it. You will have seen, if you watched me just looking at where I would place the papers, there is something about thinking, does that go there? Does this sit better here? Compositionally, how does it work? At one point I was going to have that kind of tower thing right below the eye. I almost thought that looked like some sort of teardrop, but then I thought there was better balance having it on the other page. Looking at it in some ways, at certain points I was thinking that the page with the eye looked good in its own right, and so I'm still trying at this point to bring the two pages together. Now here all I'm doing is using my fingers to add a bit more of that turquoise paint just across the two pages. I also start to use some of it on the white gesso just to knock back the white from it. Now I want to take some of those overhanging pieces off. I don't want to cut them. I don't necessarily want the pages to look very neat. I do like a little bit of overhang, but where it's too much I just wanted to take that off. And I find if I pull it up towards the back of the page, then that way it's not going to tear the image completely off the page. Once that's done, I take a look at it to see if I need to add something else. And all I decided to do here was to look for some found words. This is an old textbook page. I think I'd previously tea-dyed it or something of that sort. And I just looked to see what words would jump out at me. And of course, it wasn't in straight lines within those pages. It was just certain words jumped out. So now what I'm doing is just looking to arrange these on the page, and then I will take some gel matte medium and glue them down. So as I do that, let me remind you that Nina will also have a video this week, and I will of course leave a link to her video below. I'll also leave links to the scroll journal and the journal jar that I made as part of this month's prompt. I'll leave links to them below as well. So as a final step, I'm just going to take this ordinary pencil and just kind of go around the words. I didn't want it to be too stand out. Again, I want it to be integrated within the page. But what it says is the task of the individual is to develop an understanding of the future. And for me, that was quite interesting where that came from. It was simply found words. But to me it connected the eye and some of those natural elements in there, as well as something, or a couple of things really well from the past, the terracotta soldiers and also that tower. And I guess to me it means something. And I'll put an image at the end of the video. But I do hope you've enjoyed this intuitive collage journaling process. And yes, I hope to see you again next time. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.